And then we get, keep your wife to yourself. So what this is, the tradition will later unpack this and tell us that, well, should I say it? Okay. So the tradition will later tell us that that Muhammad arranged for Zayd to marry a woman named Zaynab. She's not mentioned by name in the Quran. The tradition fills in that name. And the tradition also is confused about who the woman is. Sometimes they say it's a woman named Kulthum, then they say it's Zaynab, and eventually it's only Zaynab. But there was early uncertainty over who was this woman. So Muhammad arranges for Zayd to marry Zaynab. Zaynab is reluctant to marry her, just as Zayd was reluctant to marry Barakat Ayman. Now the shoe's on the other foot. She doesn't want to marry him. And
I mean, presumably because he's a manumitted slave and not a high-class kind of guy.
Whoa. He's Muhammad's adopted son and heir. He's not a manumitted slave now.
Okay.
He was manumitted, then adopted, took on Muhammad's name and the right to inherit from him. And the tradition never mentions that. Who wouldn't want to marry Muhammad's son and heir?
Fair enough.
So Zaynab doesn't want to marry Zayd, and God intervenes in history to secure the marriage. And it's verse 36, the immediately preceding verse reads, no believing man or no believing woman has any choice in a matter after God and his prophet have decided it. So that's just one of several divine interventions in history in this episode. God will intervene in history at least 4 times. Directly in this episode. So Zaynab's hands are tied. The verse has been revealed. She marries him, and we learn that she was a very beautiful woman, but apparently she wasn't a very good wife. And it was not long before Zayd was tearing his hair out, and he couldn't take the woman. That's when he goes to Muhammad and says, "I want to divorce her." And Muhammad says, "Then no, keep your wife and fear God."
So those are the words hypothetically captured or repeated by God and captured in verse 37 of Quran 33.
Right. So Zayd goes back home, but Muhammad is he's not done. As Zayd's wali and father, it's his responsibility to secure what in Hebrew they call shalom bayit, peace in the house. So he decides one day that he goes to visit the couple at their house with the intention of Zayd told Muhammad that she's got a sharp tongue. She berates him. She's just not a good wife. So Muhammad goes to their house after that conversation with the intention of educating her, of instructing her on how she should be a good wife. And he comes to the house, and there are many versions of this story, different versions. But in all of them, Zayd is absent. He is off somewhere doing some unspecified task, and Muhammad enters into the room where Zaynab is located, and he glances at her. There's the nazara elayha, wahawiyaha in Arabic, and he fell in love with her. He had a sexual attraction to her. The only words he's reported to have said by the tradition are Subhanallah, Musarrif al-Qulub, praise be to God who can cause a man's heart to change on a dime.
And just to maybe animate a bit more the account, as told in the traditional Islamic sources, I think you mentioned in the book that one of the narratives of this account is that Zaynab sort of modestly is behind a curtain or something, and God sends a wind that lifts the curtain enough so that the Prophet can catch a glimpse of her.
Right. And in one version, the entrance to the house has a hair. It's a cloth hanging made out of animal's hair. So you
Yeah.
have
Okay.
a Freudian kind of sexual image there. In another version, Zainab is wearing the type of clothes that Arab women wear in their private quarters, presumably something that's, I don't know, light.
Or loose. Yeah.
And then in another version, a strong wind comes by and lifts up her skirt so that Muhammad catches a glimpse of her. And according to Zainab, Zainab herself says about herself, "I am the most beautiful woman in the tribe of Quraysh." So she was a beautiful woman, and Muhammad falls in love with her. Muhammad leaves. Zayd comes back to the house, and Zainab says, "You want to know what happened? You want to know the story of what happened between me and your father today?" And she tells him the story of what happened. And when she's done, she says, "Do you want to hear it again?" And when she's done a second time, she says, "Do you want to hear it again?" That is, she is this vain woman. She's not portrayed in a positive manner. She's a very highly boastful, vain woman. And
I mean,
now,
according to the report, she did sort of say, "I am the most beautiful woman of the Quraysh." So
right,
she's not bashful about these things.
right. And now, at this point in time, the two cease having sexual relations, which is actually a key detail. Although Zainab is careful to make the point that she didn't deny Zayd access to her, but rather she says, "Lam yaqdir alayya," or "Lam yastati'ni." He couldn't do it. She suggests that he had some kind of a sexual dysfunction. Zayd returns to the Prophet now, and this is when verse 37 is revealed to Muhammad, quoting Muhammad's language. And then, "Keep your wife to yourself, fear God. But you hid within yourself what Allah was about to disclose." This suggests that Muhammad knew that this revelation was coming, or it had come, but he didn't share it with the community because he was perhaps uncomfortable about this whole episode. But then the key phrase then is the next one. "And you feared the people, but it was God you were supposed to fear." This is a rebuke.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Quran itself suggests that there's controversy here, right? It's the controversies not only in the Islamic sources or later Christian polemics attacking the ethic or moral fiber of Muhammad. The Quran itself clearly is alluding to some controversy, it seems to me.
Right. And that was widely known. On the point of the Christian polemic, I want to emphasize it was the primary function of that polemic was to establish that Muhammad was not a true prophet. And they did that by referring to his sexual behavior. But it was the attempt to deny his true prophecy that was, I think, behind that polemic, and that needs to be appreciated.
Okay.
But where else in the Quran does God rebuke Muhammad? I don't know
You fear the people when it was God whom you were supposed to fear.
Right. And we may come to some parallels to David and Bathsheba, but after the David and Bathsheba episode, the prophet Nathan rebukes David. So there's parallels like that. Then it's the Arabic is kada zaid watarahu. The word watar occurs only twice in the Quran, both times in this verse. It's not clear what it means. Nobody, the earlier lexicographers and commentators don't know. It seems they glossed it as haja, need, in the sense of sexual need. When Zayd no longer had any sexual interest in the woman.
Interesting.
And that's why the detail about the two of them had ceased having sexual relations is important. That confirms what the Quran is saying, that that's a key condition for marrying the wife of your former adopted son, is that the two of them no longer are having or want to have sexual relations. We gave her to you in marriage. It's one word in Arabic. Zawajnakaha. We gave her to you in marriage. We, God, gave her, this unnamed woman who was married to Zayd, to you, Muhammad, in marriage.
So this is an intervention in history.
Right. This is the proverbial marriage made in heaven.
Yes. Yes.
Just as the marriage to Rachel and Isaac in the Hebrew Bible also was a marriage made in heaven, so too the marriage of Muhammad to Zaynab was a marriage made in heaven. And Zaynab would later boast to the other wives of the prophet that you were given in marriage by your fathers, I was given in marriage by God.
By God.
And Gabriel served as his agent or whatever. And then you get the rule. So that there may be no haraj, which I would translate as sin, not restriction. There should be no haraj, no sin. It's a synonym of junah. No sin for the believers regarding the wives of their adopted sons. Why should there be a sin here? What is the sin? I mean, restriction makes no sense. But the sin is Muhammad is going to have sexual relations with a woman who had been his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son. Forget that it's adopted from the second, the wife of his son. And in the Hebrew Bible, it's very clear that a man who has sexual relations with his kala, his daughter-in-law, has committed a grave sin, and the penalty is death. And so Muhammad has been brought to the point of committing a sin here. According to later Islamic theology and tradition, prophets are immune from sin, but that doesn't mean they're not capable of making a sin. What it means is they're human like others. They might commit a sin, but God will, because they're prophets, God intervenes in history.
Yeah, I mean, I might push that a bit further because at least your reading of this verse, which seems compelling, implies that God, instead of, say, changing the mind of the prophet and guiding him to another decision, changes the rule. So instead of, I don't know, it's a very American analogy, but instead of helping the batter swing well and hit a single, changes the rules of baseball, so
But the Japanese
ball actually counts as a single.
It's what the Japanese umpire do with American players in Japan. They restrict the strike zone, or you can open the strike zone for the Japanese players.
Yeah, because I mean, the prophet will proceed to marry this woman, at least if we read the verse in light of the tradition. But now God has decreed that this is not a. I mean, if that's the right reading of haraj, this is not a sin.
Right. Now notice,
because there's no mention, just to complete the story, I'm sure you were going to get there anyway, but there's no mention of the repudiation of Zayd as the prophet's adopted son in this verse, right?
In fact, not only is there no mention of that, it's the key to the rule that is introduced here is the fact that Zayd is Muhammad's adopted son and not his biological son.
Right.
And so presumably Zayd continued to be Muhammad's adopted son after he divorced Zaynab and Muhammad married her. There's no reason for him not to. I mean, that is, let me go back. God intervened in history by putting on his lawyer's cap, and he solved the problem by making a distinction between adopted sons and biological sons. It was forbidden, is forbidden, and remains forbidden for you to have sexual relations with the former wife of your biological son.
Right?
It was okay, is okay, and remains okay for you to have sexual relations with the former wives of your adopted son, so long as they no longer have any interest in them. So adoption continues. The practice of adoption continues, according to this verse. And that will become a problem that will have to be dealt with by yet another divine intervention. But the point is important. Zayd continues to be Muhammad's adopted son, Zayd, the son of Muhammad, with the right to inherit from Muhammad after this episode ends.